Ben, good to see you.
Good to see you as well.
And I was super excited the other day when you texted and you mentioned that you're starting medical school. And I was reflecting on just how many years I've known you and all of the growth you've had. And I thought there's a lot of people who would benefit from your journey, who could learn a lot. I know I certainly can. I wondered if you could start us off by telling me a little bit about you for the people. I know you, but for the people who don't know, how do you describe yourself? What are you doing? What are you about?
I feel like I'm a very relaxed, almost disorganized by nature. I feel like I'm not a very plan A person, although I have times that I can be, but typically it's just go with the flow. I think that before we started talking, I was very unaware that I thought I knew everything. And the fact that I thought that I understood everything to such a deep level, even though I really didn't. And then as I've started continue to talk to you and work with you, I started to see there was holes in the knowledge. And so I think now I still have that fun loving, disorganized person inside, but a lot of it also comes out. I have to break things down to a foundational level. And that
Yeah,
way I can break down and understand it better. But I still love to be spontaneous and have a good time. Yeah.
I like that description. I think it captures the you that I know fairly well.
Yeah.
How do we know each other?
It was from Taekwondo. I remember I was at Lee's. I had joined on a whim, obviously. And so as I would do, because I had known some people that went to the class and I was like, yeah, sure, I'll join. I had done other martial arts. I dabbled before, but I was like, yeah, I'll go again. And I ended up taking some classes. And then I think it was one of my first times I saw you from afar teaching. And usually all the other instructors are a little bit nicer. They're like, oh, it's okay. Everything's okay. And then I remember hearing you, you're like, why is your butt out? Your butt is so far. You're not approaching. It's very straight to the point, I would say. And I was like, whoa, I love that style because I definitely wanted to get better at things and I get fixated. So, and then I think when we actually started, I think the first time you taught me was a little bit later, it was a while later. And then I think I was mid to high belt at that time. And I think you were supposed to have some type of other lesson, but you ended up staying an extra hour. And so I got the opportunity to work with you. And I was on the receiving end of the flat out. And, you know, it was that at that time where I was learning form, I thought, what's the real point of this? I want to learn how to defend myself or I want to learn how to fight, right? And then this is dumb. And you picked up on that immediately. And you're like, yo, put some effort into it. This is not just movement. There's so much more of this you're doing. And then I remember you would break it down. You're like, this is what this is for, and this is what that's for. And so that was really big for me. 'Cause it's like, oh, this actually does something. There's something that I'm working on, even though I might not use this sequence of moves. The preventing of the connection and understanding what's going on is really big.
Hmm.
And so it took me back to the basics. My always been, but I never really understood it until you really just pointed it out and it's like, this is what it is.
Hmm.
So that's how we first met. And then, yeah, that was the biggest part.
So there was something about figuring out the purpose behind what you were doing, what you were learning on the mat that resonated with
Yeah, and it was, yeah, that as well as I remember very distinctly, it was you're cleaning the fans with all the dust on it. And I was like, oh, why are you wearing a mask? Who cares? And you're like, are you kidding me? Do you know how dirty this is? Come on. And then you started like, going off about all these things. I was like, oh, he's smart, huh? And so it was just I guess the biggest things interpersonally wise is that you're convinced in your presence. And then also your you could just tell that you had a deep understanding of things that in a worldview that was very particular and not common. And so I was like, I want to learn from this person. I want to learn as much as I can from him. And so, yeah, that's when I started to try to, whenever I got a chance, I would try to come and learn from you or talk. Yeah.
it's very generous. I'm reflecting on, what was going on in my head during those interactions. And I remember you were very eclectic. I know that you were doing some sort of wrestling or jujitsu on the side. You were doing breakdancing. So you'd show up and you'd
Yeah.
be able to move your body in all of these different ways. And I would watch and I'd be like, man, this is a really talented guy. Like, that's cool.
Yeah.
You always brought that joy and that enthusiasm, that creativity. And those were the things that jumped out.
Yeah. And I think one of the biggest things was that what I realized closer to college time was that it was almost messy how many things I was interested in. But I remember that was something you pointed out to me too. You were like, you're not focused on anything. It's like you do a lot of things, but you're just dipping your toes in each one. And so, and I was like, every time I'm going to try something, I'm going to give it my all. Even if I don't necessarily great at it, but I'm going to try and take my same mentality and know if I'm going to do it, I might as well try the best I can. And that was something also that I really learned talking to you of just hearing that, hey, what you're doing is it's fun, but it's your growth is stunted at some point just because you're not taking anything seriously. And I was like, oh, that's actually very true.
That's a big one. It's one that I think about a lot too recently. And AI makes a really good demonstration of this, where if you're trying to train an AI model and every input you give it is different and the feedback that you give it is different, then the AI model is in this sort of state of artificial existential crisis. What am I? What is my purpose? What am I supposed to be good at and bad at? And when I produce an output, how do I know which of the possible outputs is better? Because every day it's something different. And I think that's something that we run into whenever we reach beyond novicehood in anything and we're getting into the level of adept or expertise. There becomes a point at which refinement, precision, specification, figuring out really what is the end goal of who we're becoming. What are we going for? So I remember there was a period, I think I had gone to do my master's and go to medical school. We lost touch for a year or two, and then I got a text from you, and that was around the time you were you were somewhere in the middle of undergraduate school, and as much as you want to go into in this format, what was going on at the time and what led you to reach out?
Yeah, I actually remember very vividly that day. I was really struggling with one, the adjustment of going from high school to college. Even though I didn't really go at my hometown, I had moved out by myself and I had a lot of friendships that died out. I was feeling very alone and I was unsure about everything. And I knew, or I thought I knew that I wanted to go into medicine. And I was like, oh, I feel so lost. I don't know what to do. And I remembered that you wanted to be a doctor. I remember at Taekwondo time, you said you were going to be a neurosurgeon. I was like, that is crazy. But so I remember reaching out to you and I was really scared because I was like, I feel like this is so out of the ordinary. And it's, I don't know, we hadn't talked and I was a little worried about it. And I remember I was walking through the new building of UT when I got your response. I think you were in medical school at that time during still your didactic years. And I was really surprised that you responded and said, do you remember who I am? And I remember very vividly, you gave me a description of my looks. You said you're an Asian man about 5'10" high. Your hair, I ran very specifically that your hair clung back towards your face, cover your head. And you described me. I was like, oh, wow, that's crazy. That's so funny. He not only remembers me, but he can describe me with words. There's a lot of people say, I know faces, but I don't know if you know faces that well. And so during that time, so I was struggling with, I feel like everything. And I went to college because I thought it was the next step. I didn't really feel anything. Okay, let's get going. And I was really struggling with a lot of things internally with anxiety, depression, those symptoms. And at that time, I still didn't really understand what those things were, but I didn't really understand the full picture of mental health at all, or things like self-esteem or self-confidence, things like that. And so those were things I was grappling with, but I didn't even know that I was grappling with. And I remember, I think one of the first few times that we were talking, it was, I would say something and you would be like, see, that is a sign of low self-esteem. You're talking about yourself as if you have no purpose in life. You have no self-worth. What value do you bring? Things like that. And that was the time where, oh, hold on, take a break for a second. Is this something that's happening to me? Everybody always says, oh yeah, depression and anxiety are so big these days, but I never thought that it could happen to me. And the more we dug into it, I started to realize, oh yeah, I think I do have a little bit of anxiety, a little bit of depression going on. And that's okay. And this is very normal emotions to be having. And I think that was around the time that you had introduced me to the 5 pillars that I learned from you, which was it's sleep, diet, exercise, mindfulness, and social wellness. And I remember sleep, diet, exercise. I'll tell you now, I ignored this. Oh, that is so dumb. Like, that's what everybody says. I eat healthy and nothing happens. I sleep a lot and nothing happens. Who cares? And I'll get you something at a time because I was coping with a lot of my mental illnesses with sports or social interaction. So I would go out, play table tennis, or I would go skateboard, or I'd do a bunch of things, or I'd talk to friends and go really late, get home really late, sleep, go to class. It was wasting the day away until I could hang out with friends. And then I wouldn't have to think about things. And around that time, I started thinking about, okay, well, sleep, diet, exercise. And I was starting to think more. Obviously, I thought those were just waste of time. I was really focused on the mindfulness and social wellness. And those two concepts are completely new to me. I never thought about it that way. And the biggest one that I really couldn't grasp was just mindfulness. And I remember you described it as you feel why you feel that way and what you're going to do about it. And I remember that I started this routine for a week. I would go to this park, I would run like 2 miles, and then I would sit on top of this watchtower. I just sit there and just try to think. And I'm like, this is not working for me. And I came to you and I was like, this is not working. I maybe I'm doing something, but it's not working for me. And I remember you told me it was like, it's just like working out. Or any other sport you do, you have to train your mind with repetition. Sometimes, like when you're at the gym doing a new movement, you really don't get it. You're doing it and it feels very clumsy. And you're like, I don't think this is working with my muscle. But after you do it a few times, you get used to it. You're like, oh, now I feel it in the biceps when I curl, or in the bench, I feel it in my chest, and instead of a different part. And then around that time, that was when I was first introduced. It was for the sleep diet exercise. It took me a lot longer to figure that out. The mindfulness and social wellness, I was really working on that. I started to realize what friendships were and that meant to have true friendships versus people that you kind of talk to because of proximity or because you're uncomfortable. Just people that use you as, in your words, as a folk hunting bag. And that term, I was like, oh my gosh, I don't even understand what that means, but I could connotation. And so that would start. And then I started to realize through a lot of reading and practicing, I was like, I guess the new term is trauma dumping on somebody, right? Emotional punching and trauma versus being a friend and figuring out what that meant. And so, yeah, that's where I used started to learn those 5 pillars. And now I'm using those every day. I'm in a new environment. I've moved again. I've actually moved from this time. So I'm 5 hours away from my hometown in a place that I've never been to other than my interview, in a place that is very unfamiliar. And there's not a lot of familiarity for me to latch onto. And just making sure I sleep at the same time every day, eating well, taking care of myself, as well as having good social interaction, understanding that if I had a rough day, I have the grace to feel not good about it, but it doesn't mean that I can just sulk all day either.
Mm.
And so being able to control my thoughts and my emotions a little bit better throughout the day if I had a rough day. And so I'm still in the beginning stages, and definitely moving away from home is a little bit rough at first, but I adapt way better than I did before, not even moving
Yeah,
outside of the home of the DFW.
that's a big shift. You mentioned these 5 pillars: diet, sleep, exercise, social wellness, and mindfulness. Amidst this transition, which I know a lot of people are going through right now, how are those concepts showing up for you and making a difference?
I think I would not lie. My sleep was very horrible before I came here. I was trying to stuff many experiences with friends, so I was sleeping very badly, very trash. And so for the first few days, this is the easiest, is that I would go to bed, I would wake up in the morning, I'd get tired, I'd be like, ugh. And I remember during COVID, especially, I really struggled with sleep because we had to stay in and there was no urgency to get out. But having that set schedule and understanding that I had enough sleep and me being tired was just me wanting to stay in that comfort gives me no excuse to be like, oh, I need a little extra sleep today because I didn't sleep as much yesterday or I didn't sleep as much last night. And things like that, it just gives me less choice, but more freedom, which sounds really weird. In the fact that I have less choices on what I eat or what time I sleep and things like that. But I have a little more freedom in the way that I use my time because I understand I've taken care of my biological being. So there's no need to go out of my way to reinvestigate if I need food or if I need sleep or if I need to exercise more. Of course, I still reevaluate, but during that day is very much like, okay, this is taken care of. Let's go for the more abstract studying, or if I'm not good health for some reason. And so that's what I mean, which is a little weird, but
You've highlighted a really important concept. And in my typical direct style, I refer to it as the idea of useless questions. So, what's a useless question? A useless question is a question that is not going to change your behavior depending on its answer. So, take, for example, the question, should I go to the gym, for example? Should I eat a healthy meal, for example? Let's say that you have committed. I'm going to live a balanced life. I have a value for taking care of myself. I have a value for eating well. And you know how to do it. You've come up with a plan. You've experimented. You've been through different diets. You've been through different exercise plans. But you're asking yourself every day, you wake up like, am I too tired to go? Am I too lazy to go today? Am I whatever? So you're not really asking any question that's going to change your value. It's not going to change what you want. You've already done that where you thought about what do I want and how do I do it. So anytime you ask that question, you're just making it harder on yourself. And you're reinforcing self-doubt, 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 self-doubt. The product of that is that you're exhausted because you've spent all of that energy just doubting yourself and doubting the plan that you've made, doubting what you know already works. And I love the way that you describe that of having fewer choices but more freedom, because by giving yourself fewer choice around the things that you don't want to be different, the things that are working, the things that you want to stay the same, you give yourself less choice, it frees up your mental bandwidth and your energy to do things that actually matter.
yeah, I definitely saw that after COVID because obviously I was a hermit during COVID and I ended up being at my max 40 pounds for COVID. So no COVID-19 for this guy. I was at 40 pounds over my weight. And so one day I was like, oh, it's what's to go to the gym for me anymore. It's like I don't. I feel like maybe I'm still sore from last time or it's raining. And it's like no, it's something that you have to do. Like how we do. There are things that we have to do. I'm sure. I feel like there are things that I felt like one of them was I had to play this game. And it's like no matter how late I sleep, I would be like, I have to play this game, and it was like not a choice for me. And I feel like I was like, why was it so easy for me to hop on the computer and play games for 5 hours straight instead of literally going to work out for maybe even 20 minutes or doing some push-ups, jumping jacks, run a lap. So I definitely saw that giving myself that choice was really hard. It was way harder for me to fulfill my needs rather than say, this is what I'm going to do today instead of letting myself decide if it's right or things like that
Yeah.
for these 5 things. And so that was something really rough during COVID because I was thinking more sleep. And so I ended up not studying as I should have. Yeah.
Should is one of these words that creates a lot of problems. But you studied as much as you did, and you
So,
managed to keep your motivation, do the work that needed to be done. You're in medical school. Well done. I think a
Thank
lot
you.
of people have this idea that discipline is sitting there and constantly denying yourself what you want, but it's not necessarily true. I think discipline is a set of skills. One of those skills is intentionally making a decision or consistent action. And once you've made it, you just do it. Some days you show up and you don't have that much energy to give. Some days you show up and you do an excellent job. But no matter what's there, you show up because you've decided to show up. And that's what you've done. And I'm so glad to see that it's benefited. Well done.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. It's definitely not easy. But now that I know how hard it was to get there, it's every time I think about maybe I'll skip today, I'm go all the way back up to work that discipline again. Where it's like, let's just chill out for a second and think through this.
If
So,
if those inconsistencies are a big deal to you, then when they do happen, they're not a big deal because it's a big deal to you. You're not letting it happen willy-nilly. If
mhm.
it's not a big deal, I can miss that, I can miss that. Then the little things you miss, the choices you make that go against the plan that you've made, they'll add up more. They'll be a bigger deal. So
Okay.
I'm curious, you started medical school, and I wanted to put some time aside during this conversation to talk about what are the challenges you're facing right now and
Um,
strategize.
yeah. Honestly, I feel like I was gonna feel a lot of imposter syndrome. I wouldn't say I'm feeling a ton of it right now. I feel like how the school curriculum starts.
Mhm.
I'm either going through things that I've gone through before or things that seem very, I guess, mild in a sense. It doesn't feel like I'm in medical school yet, like buried deep in being and things like that.
Mhm.
I feel like one of the biggest things for me was just understanding that even though something may not support, just like before, it's like you have to still give it your all. And then maybe you might find some meaning behind it later. And so one of those things is I make a lot of jokes during my study, but the ethics part of my course. That's during the lectures, they're like, oh, well, don't pass out drunk on the street. Don't drink inside school property. And it's like obvious. But when I started to look a little bit more into the ethics part, the other thing about it, I was like, well, I can still improve my ethics in the fact sometimes when I was working as a medical assistant, I didn't give my full patience to every patient. I didn't treat every best I could. Sometimes I would either get lazy or get frustrated, things like that. And so I realized I was like, well, there's a reason. And so what's that reason after I started learning it? And then other than that, it's also just figuring being confident enough to go and try, basically. Going to medical school, you are with a bunch of people that also made it in, that also made the cut. And you're in this place where everybody is trying to go get them and go get it. And a lot of people are type A, obviously not very type A. And so being okay with being wrong, messing up this process, and I have and trying to keep up with a different format. And I haven't been in school for about 2 years now. And so one of them was actually that discipline of study, which I regret that I didn't really do while I wasn't in school. And so I sat down for the first time and I could only really study for maybe 10 to 15 minutes. And so I was, what's wrong with me? Do I have ADHD? Do I have something wrong with me? And I realized I was like, wait, hold on. The mind is a muscle as well. So I gave myself a little bit of grace, took a little break, came right back. And it was that consistency and discipline that we were talking about. I sit there and work. I can't do it anymore. Take a quick break and then come back. Like when I work out, same thing. You work a set, take a short break, set, take a short break. Those are the first things that come to mind right now. I'm sure I'll have a lot more barriers and hurdles to jump over, saying, but yeah.
It hits me the way that you talk about that because a few years ago, when you were going through struggles, you would have these struggles and they would be, I don't know if you remember, but it you wouldn't articulate it like this. It wouldn't be this clear concept of what the issue is, what's working, what's not working, what the work in progress is. But when you describe that, you have this clear sense. You said it earlier. You said mindfulness is what I feel, why I feel it, what I'm doing about it. And I don't know if you noticed, but when you described that, you did it using this arc of what I feel, this imposter syndrome vibe, this sense I need to be perfect and constant, but I'm not. Why am I feeling it? You explored that and what you're doing about it, this attempt at consistency and self forgiveness and balance. Really brilliant thing.
Yeah, I think I didn't even notice that actually. It's very funny because I spent a long time trying to work on that. And now when I talk about things, I feel like it's going back to the fundamental for me of thinking of, well, here's the problem. And so before I would be like, well, I'm tired or, oh, I can't start. And it's like that you gotta isolate the problem a little bit more in that way. And so another big part I thought about is the anxiety piece of starting something new, starting something that, oh my gosh, everybody's freaking whatever fire hose. It's going to be so crazy. You're going to have no time, blah, 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 blah. And I remember for anxiety was the first thing I got I hope one of your diagnoses is anxiety is the disease of what is, right? And so I had my first exam today and thought up a lot saying, what if, what if, what if? And I was, well, who cares about what if? I'm going to do my best. I'm going to do my thing. And whatever happens, that's what's going to happen. It's not like if I ask what is going to change. And I feel like when I say that, I catch myself. Yeah, I wish it was that easy when I was, figuring it out. But I think when you look back, it's really not going back to that thing that I was saying earlier is you have to do, and then you understand it after you get a feel for it. And so that is still something that I can feel, and I can feel it inside. I'm anxious to go to class or I'm anxious to talk to new people, but I have to do it in increments. I have to push the comfort level. Actually, one of the biggest things I was struggling about before I came here, it was after I got accepted and I was planning my move and things like that. I had felt huge anxiety about moving. And I was looking at all my friends that are settled down in some place that they want to go, traveling, doing the things they want. And I was like, oh my gosh, should I be doing this? Is the right choice for me? And these are all things that I've thought about hundreds of thousands of times, talked to random people about this. And I was like, oh my gosh, I know so many people that dropped out of medical school to go do, let's say, some other field. And when I was thinking about that, I really thought back first to the 5 pillars to make sure my foundation was solid. Then started continuing to think about, well, why am I feeling this like we were talking about? Why? What is going on? Really, why am I feeling this way? And I think what I figured out was that I was looking at all the goods around me and I started to think about any of the negatives. And I completely forgot about my whole reason why I wanted to be a physician in the first place. My reason to be a physician was not to go patient and to make money and do, have an extravagant lifestyle. I can obviously do those things if I would like to, but that's not the reason for medicine. I knew the risks that I was taking. I knew the cost that it would, or what it would cost me. And so that was something that I took actually a little longer than I would longer than I'd like. But it was something that was really big for me because I realized that I'd never really gone out for some this much. And it's exciting, still scary, and it's something that I'm trying to learn.
Yeah, it's exciting and uncomfortable at the same time.
Yeah.
I think the mantra that I like to use when I have medical students rotate with me sometimes, and I say my goal is for you to feel safe and uncomfortable the entire time. That's the goal. I want you to feel safe. It's a good environment. You're not going to be persecuted. And also, I want you to be just a little bit uncomfortable. I want to ask you to do things that it's a challenge for you to get them done. I want to ask you questions that you have the ability to reason through, but you don't have the answer to them. When you're in that space, you're growing. So it's actually a really good sign that you're recognizing I'm further out of my comfort zone than I've ever been. And that you're constantly having to think, okay, how do I adapt? 5 domains. How do I adapt? What do I do? How do I get better? That means that you are safe because you're keeping yourself safe and healthy and fit and you're able to cope. And you're uncomfortable. You're having to cope. It means you're growing. So well done.
Exactly. And it's funny how you say it that way because I think that I think we accomplished our first meeting was that you were asking me a question. I remember I would tell my friends about my mentor that was so scary to me. and that he would destroy you in one question. It was really funny to me. I've always been challenged physically, whether it's funny, exercising, and that, but I've never been challenged mentally until truly challenged mentally until we started talking. Because in school they give you a hard problem and you're okay, I'm gonna try to solve it. But when you start talking about a little bit more real slash abstract things, it's you really have to work through it and develop a method of thinking and a thought process to conquer these problems that aren't straight arithmetic or English or things like that.
Right. That's a common thing because people, when we come up from kindergarten all the way up, the standard path to finish undergrad, all of those milestones are knowledge based. There's very few competencies that are actually assessed, and when they are, it's often implicit. Can you do the homework consistently and earn A on the course? At what point, at any point, I mean, you tell me, at what point, anywhere between when you started school to when you graduate, did someone ask you why you're alive?
Yeah, that was a soul crushing question from you that I got. And I was, what do you mean? And I remember I told you, I was, oh, I live for other people. And that is what? What does that even mean? And then we had a whole conversation about that too.
Yeah, it makes sense. It's crushing because it's you have this your mind, your entire being is trained to thrive in a system that doesn't ask that of you. Doesn't ask that of you. And then you find yourself in this existential space where you're about to individuate, right? You're going through this identity versus role confusion, if we use the Ericksonian term. And you're okay, what's my identity? What is my role? No. So you're having this crisis. And then when you have the question, why am I alive? You're like, oh my God, I didn't answer that at all. This is a core piece of the prompt I need in order to function.
Yeah. And I find it very ironic because I think I learned about those stages and the psychology of that before I even asked myself the question. And I already studied it. And I was, oh yeah, this makes sense. People have crises. And then when it happened, you know, why is this happening? And it was very funny to me because
It doesn't
I didn't
matter.
study it. And
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't
exactly.
matter. You're studying some, doctor from over there, their theory about stuff that happens to other people. But I'm over here. No, it's you. It's you. Like, you're learning about you. And how is that? So if we examine that, why are you alive? What's your purpose? What are you doing? How has your answer to that question evolved since I first asked it to you?
Yeah, it's been a lot. I think definitely before when that question was asked, it wasn't even like, oh, I wasn't even really thinking about that. I was still in that anxious or depressive state. And so that question like, crushed me and I just ran away from it. I just got a random answer that made it sound good, but I didn't know what it really meant to me. And obviously, every time you tell somebody you're pre-med, they're like, oh, why do you want to be pre-med? And basic answer is, oh, I want to help people. I think when I really, really, really developed it or thought about it was quite late, but we were doing a writing exercise. But it's changed into I think it still changes a lot because I still have a lot of I'm still forming a lot of my views and morality and things like that and my ideals, but it's a lot more of, well, I want to help people. Sure. Okay. I remember you saying that. But why and what is behind it? And really understanding that actually helped with my personal as well, because they're asking, give me a snapshot of your life, a timeline of your life and what brought you to the moment. And I remember when I first started writing, I was like, I don't even know. I wrote the first draft. I was like, this sounds like crap and I don't want. And then we worked on it and I understood. I was like, okay, well, this led to me to here, to here, to here. And this is what I got from each of these. And this is what I am very. And so formative experiences, I can come out and say, well, this made me think this way. And this is the reason why. And just because somebody else disagrees with me, which is something that I was horrible at, it was like, just because somebody says something different doesn't mean I have to change. We can disagree. I can see the merits of his view or his reason of living, but it doesn't have to be mine. That was really big because every time I would hear somebody else have that sounds good. That's a good reason. But yeah, me too. And I think the biggest thing for me was that I found my identity and not a piece of clay that molds to whatever I see and hear and
Right.
influence with.
Right.
Yeah.
So that the personal statement was a somewhat formative process to you writing that?
Well, I think it could have been, I think honestly, there was somebody that was asking me that was applying this year or somebody that was younger. They were a freshman or sophomore. And I actually told them, I was like, if you have some, they were, I don't know what to do right now. And also you can do a bunch of things, but honestly, I was like, maybe you should try writing a personal statement down. One, don't take too much time on it, right? And then see, and then when you read it and see how you've changed, and that'll show you this is the change that I'm looking for to talk about paragraph to paragraph, event to event, or experience to experience. It was definitely a formative experience, and it was really looking back and understanding why I did things and having to write that down, articulate it. And I think that's also something I learned, that articulating what you just said is so powerful and useful. Is that saying I get it? I didn't really get it. And I would try to write down your exact words in my little notebook when you would lecture or when we would talk. And I was, oh my gosh, I have to make sure I write down every word so I remember it. Although now that I look back, that is so dumb. Why would I remember your words when I can take what you said, take the message, and make it into my words where I have the, right?
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I think being able to being forced to articulate it and look back was really big for me.
We worked together on your personal statement a little bit, didn't we?
We did a lot. I feel like a lot. We did it, I think, for one or two cycles. And yeah, we did.
What was that process like for you?
It was interesting. It was very interesting. I think I've always done resume or some sort of college essay with other people. And a lot of that was very much, let me write something and here, just read it. You tell me what's wrong. And that's what I expected from you. And I do that. And then the second time I submitted something, I remember you got upset because there was some weird wording that I don't even know. It was just a typo. And you're like, why are you wasting our time? Like, not even our time, but your time and my time, our time, and your money and everything. When you know that this is not right, and then you submit it to me when you pay me and we work on stuff, and this just doesn't make sense. Like, it's why.
Yeah.
And I was like, you know what? You're so right. Like, that doesn't make sense at all. And so after that, I took the writing a little more seriously when I would submit it to you. It wasn't like, okay, I'm going to submit you something. You're going to put bad parts and just good parts. I'm going to give it to me back. And then I'm going to take that and I'm going to move stuff around and you're going to do it again and you write it for me. And it was a lot of work on my end, I'm sure, as well as your end, but it was a lot more work on my end than I was expecting or used to.
Yeah.
And so when I would write, it was very much I would write, I feel like a perfect final draft. And then it'd be like, no, this doesn't make sense like this. And then you would ask me about something I would write about. And you say, well, I remember I was trying to force a research paragraph that I was just really trying to jam it in there. And my research experience I had some, but it wasn't resonating with me because I think it was just the experience wasn't my son. And I was just trying to jam it in there. So I was thinking, oh yeah, the admissions board wants to hear it. They want to know what I got out of it. You're like, what did you get out of it? And I was like, what do you mean? Like, I can't talk about it. And it's like, well, then it's not part of your story, right? Like, you have that experience, you did it, great. It's on your resume. Now tell us your story. And so that was a big clicking point for me. It was that, well, it's truly not the checklist. It's literally just your story and why you got somewhere. And when I was writing, it was we would review it. I remember we would talk about it and break down, okay, well, this is what we talked about, just the subjects that I wanted to talk about first. And I remember my first line, I was so proud of it when I first wrote it. And you're like, hey, it's pretty good. This fits you. I was like, learning how to learn was the most important lesson that I had ever learned up until this point.
I remember that.
Yeah. And I realized also that the personal statement, I always thought of it as, oh, it needs to be so dramatic and it needs to be so like things movie style. Oh my gosh, this so insightful. It's like, it really doesn't happen. It's really not, right? It's like we're taking things that I've experienced and I've gotten. So, and then naturally, yourself will come out on the paper, learning how to learn. How can I just get the most simple sentence I can? I was like, learning how to learn. I was like, that's really dumb, but I'm going to go with it. And I think also that was another thing that I learned was that letting my thoughts flow sometimes. And I remember related it to music and guitar and fiddling around. And you can't say that this one note is ugly. You have to out. And then sometimes in some contexts, it's a little fit. Sometimes it does. And sometimes it's okay. There's better. And letting thoughts flow out and finishing that thought before cutting it off and saying, no, that's bad. And sorry, got a little sidetracked. The process was very my-side intensive, as well as I'm sure yours, but it was a lot of reflection on what I was thinking about and also how I was articulating. And I remember I would pick up certain ways that you would talk about or that you would write sentences. And me, myself, I was like, why does this sentence sound better than this sentence? We didn't really go over it that much, but that was something that why is it always done so much better?
Yeah, that
So,
pause on that, right? Because a lot of folks, not my clients, but people in general, when they get admissions consulting, they'll get some feedback and they will think, doing it this way is better because my consultant said so. And the thought stops. And when you take that approach, you will not get better at writing. And I'm glad that you found it extremely difficult because what it means is that you were not trying to produce a product. You were seeing your own ability to write as the product. You were trying to train yourself to write. And I love the way that you describe learning to compare. I write it this way, write it this way, write it this way. You get this feedback and that feedback. You try again, and you look at all of this, and you're like, this one really hits, and it doesn't stop there. Then you say, why does it hit? Why does it hit? And when you understand the why, all of the subsequent things that you write better.
I did feel that in the supplemental. I applied twice. So when I did the supplemental the second time, it was honestly a lot easier because the thoughts that were coming through my head were a lot more articulable rather than before it was like as if I was just hanging out with a friend and talking. And I would have to write it out and then I'd go back and then I have to basically read and try to decipher my own sentences that I just 5 minutes ago. And so I really saw an improvement in my first, what I was just typing right from my brain because I start to understand that, hey, there's a certain way that we talk about things where it's more clear. And it's really funny because sometimes I don't know if you've seen the show Modern Family. It's when they make jokes about different ways of saying things. I'm like, oh, I used to say it like that, but now I can understand if I move the words around a little bit or use a few different words here and there, it becomes a lot more clear and you can't really be misconstrued or lost in the sentence. And that's one thing that in English and from K to 12, my English papers was just write it, send it in. I don't care what grade I get. As long as I pass, I don't really care. So it was definitely very good. And then I found to write some research papers and I could bring over some of the skills over from there too. And it's a definitely a style of writing, but you can understand why a sentence is clear or why it's not, things like that.
Mm-hmm. It's very profound. I tell people all the time that writing the personal statement can be one of the most formative experiences when you're applying to medical school, or it could just be a pain. It just depends on you, right? Depends on what you want to get.
I think it's both for me.
You
But
describe very well the ideal outcome, which is that you learn these things about how to communicate yourself.
that was something that I use every day actually when I meet new people or things like that. Even during the interview, I feel like it was very much, it felt a little natural because before, if I had interviewed anywhere, I would just memorize my statement and then I would get parts and then I just fill it in. It's normal or natural. Oh, I don't know, maybe not. Now it's when I talk about something, I can slow down my mouth and let my work and work it out as I talk. And we're still working on it, but it's getting better. It's getting there.
And it continues to. I feel like I'm still working on it too. I actually do I do vocal warm-ups in my car. Like when I'm driving the way to do therapy or to have one of my clinics, I'm sitting there like ba 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 pa pa pa, like all getting my what's my range today and all of this stuff.
Yeah,
It's you have you know we warm up every part of our body if we're gonna go work out. When you're gonna go do an intellectual task, you warm up your brain. If you're gonna go speak, if you're gonna go communicate, if you're gonna go articulate yourself, do you warm up yourself?
exactly.
So that what you're describing of trying to say what you mean to say, just by having that intention, just like when you were writing the personal statement, there's this constant iteration. Not necessarily iteration in the process. Like you said, it's not that you get better at what comes out the first time, but you get better at the iteration. So rather than you having to go have a full conversation, have it blow up in your face, go sit down for a week and say, "Oh man, I wish I had done this." You're able to catch it in the moment. That first thing that's coming out, oh, pause, do it again. Eventually, you start taking natural pauses in the conversation and just doing that internally. It gets better.
Yeah, I definitely still struggle with that, but you know, working on it. So I think speaking out loud also is something that I learned a lot. I remember I think when I was in high school and I had to memorize some list or something. You would just say it out loud. I was like, that is so dumb. But now when while I'm in school, I'm literally in my own apartment, just sitting there I'm reading it and I'm talking to myself. I'm walking through the way that I'm thinking about something. It's this, learning about the genesis and the embryo and things like that. I'm saying, well, almost teaching myself is that, okay, well, this is happening and this is why it's happening. And this other thing is because the hormones are coming in and this and that. So I think that's also one of the big things is just talking and hearing yourself talk, which I hate. And I remember you said that you might hate it, but have to do it. I just hate how I sound, but it's something that I have to, you know, get used to, I guess, at some point, hopefully. But
There was one thing I wanted to make sure we spoke about. Do you remember we had a conversation at one point? You were trying to write about hardship. I think one of these secondary prompts. I don't know if it was a prompt or if you had the question of there's candidates who have all these stories about hardship, and you were thinking, how do I talk about that? You didn't feel like you could relate to that. Do you remember that?
I do. Actually, it was for my personal statement, actually. I think it was very, very early in my personal statement journey. I felt everybody is, oh, my grandma had passed from cancer. I want to be an oncologist. No, I said, don't anything that's a tragic story. And I do remember that. But
That comes up very frequently in my work with clients. Very, very frequently. Every year somebody asks me about this. How how did how did you negotiate? How did you come to terms with the talking about hardship, talking about challenge when your first response was, I haven't had any challenge? What do you do with that?
I think the biggest thing when we break it down was the reason why I had that impulse. Actually, I did have a prompt about chip and challenge. Now that I think about that. But yes, I think the biggest thing is that my first instinct is to go to the emotional side, right? Eat those pathless logos, right? And so my first is to go to that emotional side. And because I heard a sad story, maybe a sad movie, and oh my gosh, I'm so moved. And I started to realize I was like, there's three ways to compel argument, right? It doesn't just have to be emotional. And strongest is actually when you use all three together. And so when I first understood that, it took a while, but I understood that, hey, well, hardship can look different for everybody. What did I have to work on? And obviously, throughout this conversation, I worked on millions of things, hundreds of thousands of things. And so I think once I realized that I could remove the emotion first and something that I actually worked on, I think struggled isn't necessarily the right word for me. I think I don't notice it's a problem until it's a big problem. So that's why I thought that, oh, well, I don't have any struggles. I have two loving parents. I have a sister. We're financially comfortable. I haven't ever had to really have any of these struggling life or death situations where homeless or anything like that. I've never had that risk before. And so that was the first thing that I thought of. But as I broke it down, I started to think about just things that I have worked on and things that I think about and to focus on when I'm studying or when I'm doing things like that. And so one of the things was that my shorter attention span was one of the first things that came up. And I could talk about something about it wasn't really true. And I feel when I really thought about it, I think I had one iteration where I was just like, oh, me not being able to express myself or figure out why I'm feeling and how I'm feeling, that's a weakness. And that's something I struggle with. Right. And so when I realized that, it was, oh, wow. Honestly, you could talk about anything. It's whatever you can talk about is what you talk about, right? And that sounds really dumb, but it's really whatever resonates with you and you could talk about and understand and break down and formulate a plan to overcome, you could talk about as a struggle. And I think just reframing it first into a different mindset and then looking at it, right? Because I think we all struggle if you go to lift weights or if you do any type of workout, you struggle, we fail. It's a small failure, right? But it is a failure. It is a struggle. And so I think looking back, I had nothing to talk about. It was so silly because every day we have failure. It's something we can talk about.
I think that's a really profound insight. I think a lot of people struggle with that, and the way that you resolved it and managed to make it not necessarily about how Hollywood worthy your struggles seem at a glance, and just make it about genuinely what were the pain points that forced me to grow and how do I talk about them. It's an insight that a lot of people benefit from, I think.
Yeah, that was something that was definitely a little bit harder, especially that working on medical school applications. I feel you always see, or even college applications too. It's the heartfelt, emotional side. You never really think about, what's the actual content? And so,
Yeah.
yeah.
Then you just made it into med school, and you know, I wanted to close by mentioning there's there's a lot of people right now in the middle of the application, going through a lot of the biggest challenges that you've been through and that you successfully negotiated. If you were to give one biggest piece of advice, the most generalizable, impactful lesson that you learned on your journey to this point, what would it be?
That's a hard question.
Yeah, not necessarily the
I
biggest
mean,
one to you, but the one that you
yeah,
think a lot of people need to hear.
let's break it down together, right? Because that's what I've been doing the whole time, right? I feel like my first instinct is to be applying and all the anxiety that comes with it, all the generic stuff. And I think I just struggled with that. And overcoming that was also a big thing for me. But I feel when I really think about things and from a larger perspective, during my
Right.
first application cycle, I really didn't focus. I'll admit, I did not try my hardest. I've admitted so late. I was in this limbo where I was too anxious. I told myself I was too anxious to work. So I go and distract myself. And then the work never got done. And then I never got it. And while I was working, I was trying to cycle, or while I was working and I was seeing the real world outside of how people live. And I remember when I brought this up to you, you pointed out a farmer doesn't think about all these things. He's okay. I gotta get up. I gotta tend to my crops. I have to tend to my animals. And I think the mind shift of understanding the huge world out there and understanding you chose this, but why are you choosing it, right? Understanding your why in the times of struggle and breaking it down, having that ability to say, I'm choosing this and this is why, things like that, having that why point, because there's many ways that you can make a living. And part of that later I pulled from the past was the ikigai part of
Yeah.
understanding what job fits for you the best, whether you want it to be or not. These the five things, breaking it down that way, and understanding, okay, this is the profession that fits me instead of thinking about all the things that I want, I wish could be. And I definitely, even though I am in medical school, I still sometimes think about this. Oh my gosh, I want to be a doctor. Like, that's not the reason why I'm going. Well, it's nice to feel that way. It's validating, but it's not the reason why we're going through. And so whenever I would struggle, I would think about other people and other lives. And I would think about, is that something fits me better? And kind of challenging continuously to challenge my current position of what I found. And I remember I was deathly afraid of doing that before because I knew that I didn't have a good reason to go into medicine. And I was definitely afraid that you would kind of just call me out and be, you have a good reason. So what are you doing? And I'm sure you've gotten pretty close at some points, but that was one of the scariest parts for me just because I was kind of that imposter syndrome, but honestly, I was kind of an imposter because I didn't have a reason. And so continuing to challenge myself and face these things and understanding that maybe the truth might not always be what you want to hear, but always challenge my current point of view and trying to understand a wider perspective. I think that was really what got me through a lot of it and understanding that I'm struggling, but it's okay. Everybody struggles in their own way. And it helps comparison as well, which I think is one of the biggest things that I used to do a lot, still do a lot, but comparing myself to others as well was hugely detrimental to my growth in towards medicine as well as myself. And I think just understanding that there's a big effect and I'm on my journey. That's it. And sometimes I still think about, well, this person's younger than me and they're farther along. And it's like, well, who cares? I have things that I like during my year that I didn't make it in and I had an extra gap year. I ended up making such deep connections with people and understanding what helped. I had a more profound understanding of what medicine meant to me working as a medical assistant and working. I learned a lot of different lessons that I wouldn't have if I just got into medical school. And I think I would have struggled 10 times worse without what I did in that year, the ups and downs and the lessons that I learned, rather than if I went I go now and I learned a lot more and understand what it's like outside of school, which is something you said before, outside of being a student and just living life and seeing, well, there's a lot more stuff out there like paying taxes and some of the basic living things like utilities and things like that. Just understand before you come back and say, this is what I want to contribute another 7 to 10 years of. And
Yeah.
I've already done this in college and K to 12. So definitely a long time. So
Ben, thank you. It's really been a privilege working with you. And it's a unique story because we've been working together since before I was thinking of medicine at all, since I think probably before either of us were. A really long time ago, just Taekwondo instructor and pupil. And it's been a pleasure sort of watching you grow through the various developmental stages and particularly the work we were able to do together when you were in college, when we were working on finding balance, figuring out how you define yourself in social settings, working on your personal statement. You've shown such an ability to reflect and a willingness to really challenge yourself in a way that terrifies most people. I think you really bear down and force yourself to figure out those existential questions that so many people shy away from. And it's just so great to see that paying off for you, to see where you've gotten. And I can only imagine how that's going to impact the people around you as you're in training and you're with people who don't have those lessons yet. And in the future, when you're a patient, when you're with your patients, I'm sure they're really going to benefit from your perspective. I look forward to the next 4 years of trying to convince you to become a psychiatrist.
yeah, and I'd like to thank you honestly for sticking around from all my mistakes and all my times where I would be like, sure, and I'm brushing off. And the biggest thing, another thing that I think you taught me, which I haven't talked about, which is crazy, is teaching. I think I would have never started teaching without meeting you and understanding what teaching is. I think that's something that I never thought that I would really do because I really wouldn't have the patience for it when I was younger. But I think teaching has taught me a lot about not just me, but how to work with people, how to break down problems and what teaching can really do. Because I think teaching and it's understanding what true teaching is, not teaching. It's understanding that teaching something, you need to be able to practice, you're practicing it under at the time as well. And you're still learning about it as well. And so I think every time I teach, I usually get at least one or two little nuggets that I knew in my head but resurfaced. I was like, oh my gosh, that actually solved the problem of mine too. And so I think that that was one of the biggest things that I learned that I have had huge success with. And I feel like when I thought about it before, I always thought, oh, I'm not tutoring, I'm not consulting, I'm not doing the classic your style. And I think I also realized was I can do teaching throughout my daily life and leadership, servant leadership, and how that all ties together. And I started to realize, oh wow, okay, I'm starting to understand all these concepts that I've heard thousands and thousands of times, but I'm starting to break it down in my head and be okay, this is what it means, and this is why it's such a great thing to be a leader, such a great thing to be a teacher, such a great thing to be a doctor. It's these things that I admire about people that I think as leaders, mentors, teachers, doctors.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.